Hello and welcome to What the Hype. This week we're switching our time circuits to on and chasing lightning in our silver Delorean because we're celebrating the 40th anniversary of Back to the Future. Before we get started with these episodes, make sure you're following us on the socials at What the Hype Podcast, except on X, where we like to be different. We're What the Hype Show. We're releasing full video episodes on YouTube and bonus pop culture content over there as well. So please check out youtube.com/@whatthehypepodcast. And joining me for today's discussion is Pam. Hey, Pam.
Hello. How's it going?
Good. Are you ready to go back to the 80s and the future?
I am. I'm super stoked to go back to the 80s with you.
It's funny because the 80s are a decade that I really came in at the tail end of, and because they seem oversized in pop culture because of a lot that's going on, and I like to claim the 2 years that I was in the 80s, but honestly, everything I really know about them is from all of the media that's followed and come out at that time.
Right. I think we're all basically 90s kids.
Yeah.
Here on What the Hype, but I think that when you are, usually you do get a lot of kickback from the decade before. Mm-hmm. And like, I don't know about you, but I think that, I think I have like a strange fascination with a lot of pop culture that comes out of the 80s as a result of that. But it's so normal, right, for generations to almost romanticize the decades that come before. So it kind of makes sense.
Yeah. And there's well, and the 80s have fascinated people, I think, since they were going on, like the last 40 years.
Well,
like,
was
you don't really see
so
that
bright
much.
And shimmery, and like they were also looking to the future in a way that we kind of started doing at the turn of the century, but like they were looking at it in a completely different way. It was very much like the future of the Jetsons, for example. They were looking at hoverboards, and we were just like, everything is metallic and also baby blue.
Right. Yeah. And oh god, the synth wave movement and everything you could do with electronic music and all of that at that time. It is, man, that was a decade. We got to do like a I love kit. The 80s decade of What the Hype and all the decades as a thing. We just got a bunch more episodes. There you go. But the question I want to ask you at the top of the show is, when you think of Back to the Future, Pam, what comes to mind?
Honestly, like a lot of it's so funny because like so much of what comes to mind, I think, comes out of the sequel. So like specifically, like the shoes, like the fancy shoes, Marty McFly, the Nikes,
self-lacing,
the hoverboards, obviously the DeLorean, definitely like the music and the soundtrack too. Yeah. Those are the big ones for me. How about you?
Yes, similar. Definitely Marty McFly's look, which is compared to a life preserver, but the fashionable vest for me, I don't know, I've seen a lot of 80s content at this time. I can't say I've seen another character in one of those vests. So I'm interested in kind of getting to the bottom of how historically accurate that was for the time.
Yeah.
Like, oh, he's just an everyday teenager. But really just the orchestral score, like you're saying, Alan Silvestri's score for the film is absolutely, anytime even somebody utters the words Back to the Future, I'm hearing some bells or something going in my head for it. So there's that, and the DeLorean, and really just any time I think of, like, I know there were blockbusters that came before it, but Back to the Future with that polished Steven Spielberg feel is really just an entire entertainment experience. It's
there's something,
the movie.
Yeah, there's something so like childlike and whimsical about Back to the Future, and I think that like in this era of Spielberg, a lot of what he was putting out was childlike and whimsical, because you look at stuff like the Goonies too, or Hook that was at the tail end of all of that was kind of like the end cap. It really was like a lot of childlike wonder in different genres and in different fonts.
And yet the protagonist in Marty McFly is allowed to swear.
That's so true.
I'll tell a story about this because like Back to the Future is one of my favorite movies growing up. We're going to talk in a minute about how we got involved and how we first experienced it. But there was a movie watching sci-fi club in 8th grade in middle school where I was growing up, and basically we 2-3 times a cycle we would watch movies for 45 minutes and go through a bunch of scientific. I saw like the Andromeda Strain that way, a couple other like classics, ancient classics I never would have heard of. Probably the first Tron I saw in that class. And I submitted for the approval of the teacher Back to the Future because I really wanted to see it in class during class time. And, she watched it. It's like, oh, I remember this. I have, it's been a while. I haven't seen it in a while. I'll get back to you, because the teacher had final approval. And when she got back to me, she said, we can't actually play this in class. And I was crestfallen. I was like, what? How? Why? And she's like, well, there's a lot of cursing. I don't know if you noticed. And, I ended up taking the movie home, watching it that night and going, oh yeah, like, holy shit, and all sorts of other curses, like, you can't say in class. And Marty is just your average older teenager, I guess.
Yeah, well, it's still rated, I believe it's still rated PG, isn't it?
Right.
Yeah, well, the 80s was a weird, the MPAA always changes their rubric, and the 80s, they really played fast and loose with that PG rating.
Yeah.
Like, I always think about, like, 16 Candles, which is another iconic 80s movies. There's, like, full nudity in that, and it's PG.
PG, yeah. Well, PG-13 wasn't even a thing until a certain period of time. I think there was one movie. Yeah. I'm trying to look up briefly. First film in Red Dawn in 1984. So there was controversy building from Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom and even Gremlins, which I would say is more childlike than Back to the Future, but at the same time very violent and vicious. I remember being scared by the Gremlins and all the havoc they reached, but apparently there was a push to create it in the mid 80s. So right around the time Back to the Future is skirting under the, with the PG rating, I think in retrospect maybe it would have been rated PG-13. But let's get into the 411 on Back to the Future. We've danced around it a little bit, but here's the summary that I grabbed from here's a summary I grabbed from Nerdist. The film centers on teenager Marty McFly, played by Michael J. Fox, who's blasted from 1985 back to 1955 in a time machine that the eccentric Doc Brown, played by Christopher Lloyd, built out of a DeLorean motor car. Marty then finds himself in a time-shattering chain of events that runs the risk of erasing himself from existence, unless he can ensure that his future parents, now high school students themselves, wind up together. Meanwhile, the past's version of Doc Brown has to try and fix the time machine to get Marty back to the future. And there's a lot of elegance in, I think, the plot of Back to the Future, which we're going to be talking about, but if you really think about this plot of, okay, this is your standard action adventure, a guy goes somewhere, he's stuck, he can't get home, how do we get home is the driver of plot for this movie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's very Wizard of Oz in that sense, right? Like that is like, it's also a movie about a girl somebody that gets displaced, we should say, who's just trying to get home. Yeah, teenagers just trying to get home. And there's something beautiful about that.
There is, and there's something also Wizard of Ozzy that I really love about what you making that comparison, in that, when Dorothy gets home at the end of the movie and sees that the Tin Man and the Scarecrow and the Lion were, kind of her uncles, the likeness, the personality of her uncles in a way, in an exaggerated sense. Marty comes face to face with his parents and people that he knew back home, but they're totally different. They're in a different, entire life cycle generation here, and getting to know them in an entirely new way. And in the case of Back to the Future, with Marty's mom, Lorraine, getting to know her in a sort of uncomfortable way, because, she falls in love with him, kind of. And the film is now, it isn't just one thing, which is what I love about Back to the Future, is it has several layers going on at all times about it. It's clever, it's fun, it's witty, it's meant to be like a I want to say like an homage to certain elements of culture while at the same time being, so present in its characters and all of
Yeah,
that.
yeah. I mean, I think we can get into this a little bit later, but I would really love to talk to you too about like the a lot of the archetypes that we see, because in some ways I watch this movie back and I think these are such stereotypical archetypes. And then I think to myself like I don't think that they were stereotypical for the time. They just that is how pop culture was portraying these people, but we've come so far now. Like Marty's dad is like the quintessential nerd, and
Right.
and he's a loser because he's a nerd, but now like we're in the age of the cool nerd.
Yeah.
So it's funny to kind of watch this movie as an adult and think like this is just not the way we portray these people anymore, or these particular archetypes of characters. So
So we've discussed films that and stories that were sort of hidden gems or less commonly known. Back to the Future, I think it's safe to say, was always a hit. It was always popular, and it was the big break that was needed for Robert Zemeckis and Bob Gale, who fought for years to get this movie made. Turns out, based on box office stats, it had a budget of 19 million. And in the original run of the movie, Back to the Future scored 212.3 million domestically and 388.8 million worldwide. So that's over 500 million, actually $600 million on a $19 million budget. Yeah, this film is rock star, basically.
big numbers too for the 80s.
Yeah, you got to think there's probably a list of, overall 80s flicks, but I can't imagine one that is really just this much of a hit that isn't, Return of the Jedi.
Right, I was just going to say the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah, so I'm curious what your introduction to Back to the Future was when you first were introduced to it, if you remember.
Okay, so this is kind of like twofold. So, we were library kids growing up, 100%. And so my brother and my mom would take us to the library, and we would pick out books, and then she would let us pick a movie each to rent from the library. And Back to the Future is one of those movies that we discovered around this time. Probably watched it for the first time too young, and it was coming off the heels of, like the beginnings of our obsession with things like Star Wars, Indiana Jones. So it kind of like slotted right in there at the right time. And so I must have been about maybe, I don't know, like 8 or 9 the first time we watched this movie. And the other half of this too is that my brother and I were always like extra fascinated by movies that had any kind of like local ties to where we were growing up.
Oh,
And Huey Lewis, which we were raised on Huey Lewis and the News music in part, is local to the San Francisco Bay Area as well. So like
oh,
that was a cool,
cool.
yeah, and similar to like Star Wars and Lucasfilm being local to the area as well. Like it was like a big draw for us to like want to watch something that had a local tie, and then we just ended up falling in love with those stories on their own after the fact. But it was definitely like an initial draw. So
Huey
yeah.
Lewis is awesome.
Oh, I love Huey Lewis in the News. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and oh my God, that's so funny because that is a big part of I think the first movie specifically is
Yeah. Power
the
of
two
Love.
songs Power of Love and Back in Time,
Mm-hmm.
both in that film, and the movie opens with Marty McFly after he skates playing that song, so
Mm-hmm.
definitely, and there's a cameo, as you know, I'm sure,
Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
the older guy who tells the Pinheads, Marty's band, that they're just too loud, and they will not be able to be entered into the Battle of the Bands competition, is played by none other than Huey Lewis. So
Mm-hmm.
very cool stuff. I probably had a similar like 8 or 9. I'm thinking maybe a little bit younger experience. And the situation was that, not to get my father in legal trouble, there were these old Betamax tapes that were copied off of pay-per-view, movies galore, that I had a just an infinite variety of able to choose from in the basement. And at some point, at some time, somebody chose Back to the Future to watch, and it quickly became a tape that was worn very thin after, repeat viewings upon repeat viewings. And what my dad liked about Betamax specifically was the longer amount of footage that you could film on it in slow mode, or EP, I guess it was called, extended play mode. And so the sequels to the Back to the Future were both on, I think, the same tape, Back to the Future 2 and Back to the Future 3. And so
That's incredible.
I would shuttle all of them, pretty religiously, pretty frequently, and just be mesmerized by the story, sure, but the special effects and sort of like the movie magic of it all. Really, I just remember capturing me.
Honestly, obviously this movie is older. If you want to get nitpicky about it, some of the stuff, obviously it's going to look older because it was made in the 80s. We're talking like 40 years, even more than 40 years ago, because the movie came out 40 years ago, but they would have been doing the post-production on that before then. I feel like it still holds up. Like, you can still suspend belief and be like mesmerized by some of the effects. And I think it's because they did a lot of practical effects too.
Yeah, that's a recurring thing that we're now seeing too, is that like CGI effects that were even 5-10 years ago haven't aged at all. And yet the effects, honestly, down to the de-aging makeup or the aging up makeup of Marty's parents.
Right.
Because all those actors were roughly, Michael J. Fox's age, and having them play his parents at the beginning and the end of the movie that are older is just done really well, not to mention the transformation of Doc, played by Christopher Lloyd. So something like that really just allows you to suspend disbelief, and you're not distracted by the fact that it is an effect. I think they really nailed that. And so if you can believe the premise, like if you can just believe, then you can be whisked away. And it helps that they've created their own, fictional town, Hill Valley, California. There's not a point of reference beyond what's established in the film as what the town is like. And then to de-age and age that, to show that through the time periods as well, is just kind of a fun gimmick.
And it's a great way to distinguish both worlds, right? Like Marty's depiction of his hometown, which I think is like, I think it's really smart. It was really smart storytelling of them to create this rundown version of his hometown, because I think every teenager goes through a phase where they think they live in a shithole and they just want to get out, right?
Yeah.
And you kind of see that it's a little like rough and tough. There's graffiti everywhere. It's like, like there's not very much to take pride in, which I think is very indicative of a lot of teenage mindset. But then when he goes back in time, you see the town transformed into its glory days. Everything's nice and shiny. It's like people are well-to-do. It's got this brightness to it that is completely different from the present day.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that it definitely is a film that 40 years on still captures the imagination. And is still just a darn enjoyable romp. So
that would be the pull quote that they would take if you were a movie.
Just a darn enjoyable romp.
Yeah, exactly. Put it on the billboard.
Yeah. Marty! We're going to be talking about quotes and all the other iconography and memorable things about Back to the Future. But first, I'll read you all of that. So we're going to be talking about the memorable quotes and all the bangers in the plot and the sequels and all of that on our future discussion. But for now, we are going to hear a word from our sponsors. So sit tight, and we'll be right back with more What the Hype.